Hello and welcome to episode 28 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is February 12th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hello, welcome.
Today we have Steffen Müller joining us to talk about the SAP Landscape Manager in combination with Azure. But before we hand over to him, let's take a look at some of the news of this week. So let me share my screen again. So the first thing that I want to start with is a new acquisition that SAP has done. They acquired a company called AppGyver in the no-code development area. I have to admit I had not heard about AppGyver, but they are apparently active in the low-code, no-code environment. So if you want to build applications with little development know-how, it seems like they have an interesting platform there. They even have a free tier, so I think that's also quite interesting. So it's really, good for no-code development. I think it will be interesting to see how this offering will evolve in SAP. Obviously SAP has this partnership with Mendix. They had this announcement with Room on the whole local platform, and now they have this AppGyver. So it will be interesting to see how this evolves. Well, if you are interested in low code, no code, then obviously we also have on the Microsoft side the Power Platform, and actually on March 10th, so roughly in a month from now, we'll have a webinar on extending SAP solutions using the Power Platform. So there we'll show in a few demos how the Power Platform can be connected with your SAP system via the SAP Cloud Platform or the Business Technology Platform there. How you can use the Power Apps to build an application, how you can use Power Automate to automate a lot of scenarios, and then also how you can use Power Virtual Agent to integrate into Teams, which I think is currently a very hot topic when we also look at the SAP RISE announcement. So if you are interested in low-code developments, then I think, I hope that this webinar can be interesting for you. Another thing is a blog by Philip Bischoff. He wrote a blog about connecting Microsoft Graph API with a Node.js application using OAuth 2.0 for the authentication. And he does this in a very detailed way again. So he has a lot of links, a lot of references there on how to set up Azure Active Directory, what you need to do to deploy your Node.js application, stuff like that. But I think this is a really nice blog that not only shows how you can use the graph, but really look at the authentication mechanism in between, so that you really have this single sign-on flow. So I thought this was definitely also a very interesting blog that talks about the graph, because obviously I think on the Microsoft side the graph is a really, really important functionality that allows you to access your emails, your SharePoint, OneDrive documents, and stuff like that. So I think with this, there are some really cool scenarios that you can do. Another thing that we talked about in the past already a few times, so Azure Backup for SAP HANA. There was a limit with 2 terabyte HANA instances in the past, but now this limit has been increased to 8 terabytes. So now if you have a bigger machine, so obviously you know these 12 terabyte virtual machines that we have on Azure, and we do have quite a few customers obviously that are running these bigger machines. Now Azure Backup for SAP HANA also supports up to 8 terabytes of data there. So maybe this can also be interesting for you. The next thing that I want to talk about is not directly related to SAP, but it's about network security in Azure. And this blog here talks about a proof of concept to evaluate and test the different functionalities that we have on Azure. So for example, looking at this table here, there's an outline. Well, for example, if I have a public facing web application, well, these are the things that I can use to protect my environment or my web app. So we have firewalls, DDoS, the web application firewall, and a front door to really protect my application. And in this blog, it's outlined how you can actually test these scenarios, how you can set up such an application, and then run, for example, a DDoS attack or something like that, and really then see how Azure and the web application reacts to these scenarios. So I think this can also be quite interesting for an SAP scenario. Think of an SAP Fiori application that you have exposed via Azure. And obviously here there are some ideas of how you can protect your applications, and then obviously also test these applications. Now, another thing, another upcoming webinar, actually already next week, is a webinar that we are doing together with SAP, where we take a closer look at how you can actually do a system conversion from your ERP system to S/4HANA on Azure. So obviously a lot of customers are still running their ERP systems on-prem, NADB solutions with different kinds of installation types, obviously. And what we want to do in this webinar, we want to outline some of the lessons learned and test results that we have done together with SAP, where how the migration of an SAP system on-prem can be done into Azure, and at the same time, obviously, doing the conversion to S/4HANA. So maybe that's also interesting.
Yeah, and I believe that would be. Oh, I'm a bit on echo. It's a very interesting feature because this is the first time that you can directly not only convert to S/4HANA, but the target system can be also in the Azure, and a source system is on-premise. So this is new. Which so far is not officially supported. So basically, you need to have everything either on-premise or everything in Azure. So here is the first time you have your on-premise source system. You have source system on-premise and target is in Azure, meaning it's also simplifying the whole process of conversion and migration to Azure as well. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think obviously here the huge benefit is, I mean, when we do the migration to HANA, obviously the whole infrastructure changes completely. And with this one-step approach, basically, you don't need to buy new hardware, or you don't need to first do a lift and shift and then do the migration, but you can really directly go to the 12 terabyte machines that we have on Azure, for example, if required, to do the migration in one step. I think another beautiful block there that Goran, you brought also up is then this block here that talks again about these migration and performance optimizations.
Exactly, and I mean, this is one thing that's extremely useful. It's written by Robert Biro, a colleague of ours. This is something, let's say, the guys who are doing the migration, and I am also kind of very actively on a customer side engaged. It's like daily bread, and this kind of basis and understanding of exactly, I mean, we promise the stuff, we promise the SLAs on the compute network storage, but you need to also a bit understand, so just an end-to-end story. And very typical, I mean, it's not extremely complex, but still there are information thrown in different places. So Robert nicely basically brought it kind of together, right? Mm-hmm. So warm and welcome, because these kind of at least basics understanding will really help to properly scale and avoid, I mean, repeating or running into troubles, and basically in that way also accelerate your overall customers' overall migration to Azure.
Yeah, I mean, if I just look at these tables, for example, that's always something that I think where you really need to take a closer look at. There are some parameters attached to a certain disk and disk type, obviously. So there's a certain throughput attached to it. But then at the same time, you need to correlate this with the virtual machines that you're running. So maybe you have a super high throughput disk, but you only have a virtual machine that actually does not support such throughput. So I think, yeah, that's looks really interesting.
And the VM they have uncached disk and the cached disk, and then the limits for both, which can be combined or are basically combined. So really, it's a good way and good tips, like how you can also new feature, like here you have on a previous picture, how you can actually change the managed disk performance without increasing the disk size. So far on the managed disk, in order to get either more space or more performance, you need to change the disk size. You need to, expand the volume, and which is more work. So if you need, let's say, only to increase the performance, okay, you can just change the performance tier without changing the size, meaning it's easier. Yeah. So nice, good tips also about the cache, how it works. How to monitor, very useful. How to use it in the Azure, just really practical. I would say steps.
Very comprehensive block.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So kind of end to end. Again, of course, it's not the whole story, but overall, it's very helpful to give the people fast onboarding with the concrete stuff, and also concrete understanding and dependency of a few different aspects.
So I think. Yeah. If you are working on a migration, this is definitely something that's worth checking out.
And also, it's also generally worthy also during the productive runtime as well, just kind of overall, right? So, I mean, okay, expectation is somebody who is already operating the stuff should know some kind of stuff, but again, it's always possible to learn something. So that would also help in a normal runtime operation of the SAP systems in Azure.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
The next thing is a webinar that is scheduled again for 10 days from now. I think this is in the context of the overall partner
with the IBM,
that we have, exactly. And I think last time it was, I don't know, actually, was it with, there was another partner, Infosys, exactly, and now it's with IBM. So I think, yeah, that's probably also quite interesting if you are interested in here, the connection of Synaps with SAP on Azure. Good, then one last thing. Typically when we record our podcast, Christian Lechner has already, or is in parallel recording his myNewsWrap podcast. Today, at least, he published it already early. So I had not a chance yet to listen or to watch it, but I took a quick look at his GitHub repository, and as always, he's, I mean, up to date and covered some beautiful links there. So he also talks about the AppGyver acquisition and some other scenarios here. But there was one link that I hadn't seen before, so I can definitely recommend to check this out. But there was one link that I thought was also quite interesting that I had missed, and that is the integration of the of Logic apps with the business technology platform. So Carlos Rogan, he always publishes very detailed, very good blogs from my point of view. And in this blog, he talks about an application running on the business technology platform that is supposed to run on a certain schedule. And Carlos has implemented this in a way that with Logic apps, it's actually pretty easy to create a schedule. So what he's doing is he's creating a Logic app that then calls the application running on the business technology platform. So as always, a very detailed blog, and he really outlines step by step what needs to be done. And then in the end, he also has all the required coding samples there as well. So I think this is really something that you can, I mean, I have not tried it yet, but I'm pretty sure if Carlos has written this blog, then this is also working. So you can easily do these steps and test it out in your very own environment. So this was just a quick overview from this week. I think with this, we can actually hand over to Steffen, who brought us some slides, but also some interesting demos. Steffen, maybe you can start by quickly introducing yourself, and then I'm looking forward to the slides and especially also the demo, obviously, that you have prepared.
Of course, and feel free to ask questions at any time and guide me. So my name is Steffen Müller. I'm born in Germany, live in the United States right now, work for Microsoft now in my third year, but doing actually SAP all the way back to release 2.1D when it was still called R3. Was actually one of the first certified non-SAP consultants for SAP.
We can see this on your beard, color of your beard.
It ages you, yes. So for the last 3+ years, I'm dealing with LaMa. Of course, LaMa especially in connection with Azure. So how we support, or how LaMa supports Azure, and it's a mutual engagement between SAP and Microsoft. Also shown that we have numerous dedicated people in this, and our so-called Azure adapter is actually delivered as part of LaMa. So it's tested together with SAP, so we're part of the test cycle. We have access to the source code and everything. So this is a really very long-standing and trusted relationship. I think it's fair to say no other cloud provider at this point has this depth in terms of connection. And without further ado, let me do a little clarification and maybe avoid some misunderstanding what LaMa is and what LaMa is not. So with this, I'll start sharing my screen. Hope I hit the right buttons here. And bring up my...
Yeah, perfect. We can see your screen.
Yes. So LaMa stands, as mentioned, for landscape management. So first, I think it's important to understand what it is not. So it's not an installation or rapid deployment tool for getting some SAP system quickly on the road. It's also not a migration tool to migrate SAP systems between the database operating system. And it's also not intended for migrating SAP workloads from on-premise to the cloud. So the pre-assumption is simply that there is already something existent in the cloud or even on-premise, of course, which LaMa can work with. There are some initial steps which need to be followed if you want to use the full benefits of LaMa. There is two main distinctions. There is a term which means adaptable or adaptive computing or non-adaptive computing. We are focusing primarily on adaptive computing, which means this gives you the most flexibility. What this does is actually that you can decouple your SAP workload from your underlying VMs, which allows you to do some fancy stuff like OS patching, for example, by a patch and build and destroy, rather than doing some open heart surgery and patching a running system. So you could, for example, deploy a new set of VMs already patched and hardened, of course, to your needs, and those will be then integrated into LaMa. LaMa itself, it's based on NetWeaver 7.5 and currently in the transition between WebDyn Pro, the old version, to UI5. So in order to get this decoupling done, we need to have a certain file system mount point logic here. So for example, for HANA database, we have HANA data, HANA log, HANA shared, and optionally HANA backup. And those will be basically handled then by our adapter with LaMa. The idea, of course, is to either copy those volumes and create new ones. We do this by means of snapshots, and we can also do this by means of, that's actually not cloning, but also, of course, a traditional backup restore would be supported as well. And for the application server, for the ABAP version, we have the SAP MNT SID, user sub SID, home SID ADM, and also the SAP Trans as the global transport directory, which will be used to make stuff globally available and to provide the mount points for the SAP application servers and for your individual SAP landscape. So what are the tasks LaMa overall supports? There's, of course, a relocate. This was basically moving one SAP system to different hosts. This can be a single host in terms of a different VM, or you can relocate the entire system to a new set of servers. We can do a system clone. I will have a slide where this difference, where this is explained what clone, refresh, and copy means. A very important step is the so-called post-copy automation. This is basically what probably in each system copy takes the longest. This is the manual adaptation of, like running BDLS, providing your printer definitions, your users, and so on to keep them, or simply adapt them to your newly created copied system. We have also rolling kernel switch, so you can do kernel patches on the running system with very minimal downtime. You can have HANA system maintenance, and you know what? I have to shut down my email here because otherwise this is not going to go anywhere. Okay. Another important stuff, of course, portal is you can dynamically install application servers. And by the way, all of those activities can be pre-scripted and can be scheduled as well. So rather than going through, all the roadmaps of setting this up, you can actually capture those. And you can keep the more static parameters, but everything, like passwords or things which may change, like name of target systems, you can actually then submit as variables. So rather than filling in 10 blanks, there might be only 2 blanks to fill. So now, some Azure specific stuff we have implemented. Very important, you can start and stop, also known as smoothing your existing systems. So they go all the way down to status deallocated, which means that the cost, of course, they incur is very minimal. That's, of course, very important for spot instances where you don't have, a longer term contract on them. So pretty much, I guess, all non-prod systems. You could actually deploy new VMs also via ARM templates. We will provide a link to our official documentation, and there's a link to a sample for a database server, an ASCS, and a primary application server on GitHub with ARM templates and either Bash script or PowerShell scripts, where you can create your own environment. As the name implies, it's a template. It's a suggestion, nothing which is in stone. We can also resize existing VMs. Also great, for example, you have a DR site, and rather than having, the database server running full capacity and wasting or costing a lot of money, you can actually downsize it and run it just to a capacity that you can apply the log shipping, the transaction logs coming from HANA. And then once push comes to shove, you can blow it up in a positive sense, of course, by enlarging it, by resizing it. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Steffen. You mentioned the ARM template to deploy the infrastructure. Nice stuff. A lot of in Microsoft is kind of also in the SAP context is being done with Terraform.
Yes.
So any plans maybe to enhance it or expand it?
Yes, there are actually plans, but right now, I think Holger wanted to mention it, or we talked about before, is our Embrace initiative with the SAP. And as part of Embrace, we're going to realign our work streams here, who does what in what context. And there's definitely Terraform Ansible a go-to place. I don't know if it's going to be retrofitted in the existing LaMa. We'll see. There's a good chance, because I don't think that's actually a major task, quite frankly, because all we can do is basically call this as an external function and hand over, those templates used by Terraform and Ansible as input. It's very important, by the way. LaMa is totally agnostic how the system was built. So whether you go to the portal, and deploy it all by hand, or whether you have ARM templates, whether you use Terraform and Ansible, all that LaMa asks to initially work with the system is having a host agent installed. That's all it takes. And from there, LaMa can take over, can install the so-called adaptive extensions, which is some enhancement, for system management. And everything else from there, is kind of downhill, so easily to achieve by a LaMa then. So therefore, you will never find 100% solution, which fits everybody. Let's face it. The service now where which systems are using, customers using provision their system, this kind of environment. So it's very, challenging to find something, which suits most of the needs here. But there's definitely, some thought in this. I can't promise this is going to happen, but nevertheless, it's at least known, it's on our plate and it's talked about. And it will definitely in the future, there will be something, down the line you mentioned, Goran.
And I think, as you quickly mentioned, as part of this extended partnership announcement that we have between SAP and Microsoft, where we talked a lot about teams and these kind of stuff, if you read through the blogs, you can really also see that our investments, our joint investments in the SAP Landscape Manager is, as you said, also on the list. So this is definitely something where we SAP and Microsoft are going to continue to invest and enhance and improve the experience. Yes. So I think that's definitely also part of it.
I mean, there definitely, there's some room for improvement in, of course, Azure specific stuff, but also plain stuff like, for example, HA clustering, whether we're talking about a pacemaker cluster for Linux or Windows cluster, failover cluster for Windows, this kind of stuff. It's, there is room for improvement in the current LaMa, and this will definitely be addressed, as part of the Embrace initiative.
Perfect.
Okay, so another interesting thing, what we can also do, when we shut down the system, we can actually change the disk type as well to standard disk, which makes it even more cost effective, shutting down your system overnight or weekend, especially those non-productive systems. So that's a nice thing we have added on top. We can also copy now for managed disks cross regions and cross systems. Cross zones within the same region. There will be more to come soon. I don't want to, what's going over my skis here, but we are definitely, working on it. And here you can see Terraform Ansible is already also on my slide. So definitely, something which is coming.
So yeah, basically that would mean you can use also for kind of maybe migration as well to another region, another zone as well. So yes. Using a system copy as a kind of migration to the different region, Azure region or Azure zone, which is nice. Yeah.
Yes. So that's definitely, something. I mean, let's face it, a lot of our customers have DR requirements, and of course DR works best if you're not in the same region. So if there's some physical distance in between, and this makes it almost mandatory for us, to address this. But IT, it's always a work in progress. We are never there. So, but we are getting better each day. So therefore, definitely something we have on the screen. So let me do some clarification, because we have heard about cloning, copying, and a refresh. A system clone is basically you take a snapshot and a freeze of your current system and you fence it off. And then you can use the system, for example, you have an error situation, you want to test something, you want to find out how long it takes, to do a month-end closing, or you even want to do an upgrade on a live system to evaluate the time it takes. You can do this on a system clone. Once you're done, you simply throw it away and unfence, And while this is existing, of course, you can resume your production without any problem.
Maybe you can explain what does it mean fencing exactly here.
Fencing means you build build firewall rules which prohibit the system to have outside contact. So, for example, to print checks, for example, for a second time, or do payroll for the second time, there would be probably not many complaints from a side, but of course the company probably wouldn't like it. But some order management, whatever the system was supposed to do, it's going to be kind of on ice. So it's basically, it's in a quarantine. That's the word of the times, right. I guess we have right now.
So basically, you need to fence it in order that some builds do not go outside, right?
Yes.
But you do not need necessarily to have another VNet, Azure VNet, to isolate it from the source. No. But you can do in the same VNet, which makes the life easier and still fencing through the OS firewall means.
It basically uses IP tables or the Windows firewall to especially eliminate those ports, which normally would have the communication carrying, like 30% service 300, those kind of ports.
Yeah.
Will be blocked, and therefore the system, of course, it can talk, if it's to a message server to the database internally, but of course not to any or any system which is not part of the individual landscape here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. System copy. At the end, we will have a new system, so we will have a new SID. For example, you wanna do a training system, a test system, a QA system. You can initially do the setup from there. So again, here you have a new SID. Probably in reality, the most used case is the so-called system refresh. This is basically, if you look, you have the same functionality actually in SWPM, where you can do refresh of the database, and that's what's happening here. So this is a multi-step procedure. Of course, there is data which you want to keep, like, for example, printer definition, user definitions, RFC destinations, whatsoever, from your source system or from the target system, from the old system. So this will be exported as part of post-copy automation. Then the database will be overwritten, and then it will be cleaned up. There will be BDLS and everything which makes the old system the new system, and then the exported data will be re-imported again. This may take, of course, a couple of hours, depending on the size of the database. All those three items here are technically done in the same fashion. In Azure, what we do, we take disk snapshots, and from these snapshots, we build new disks. And those new disks will be then attached to the new system. So you need a new set of VMs, of course, for this, in case of a system copy and a system clone. System refresh, of course, everything stays the same, because there we just overwrite basically the old database in the system. So just to give you here the clarification and definition, what's happening here.
And LaMa is,
yeah.
Sorry, Steffen, and LaMa is basically taking care of all of this. So as an end user,
to end. Mm-hmm. Yes, this is like a workflow where you basically define all the parameters, and you say, I want to create out of system SO1, I want to create SO2. Mm-hmm. I want this data to be copied, and I will show you, for example, an example how you can influence your post-copy automation. But it's always basically a clone. And then in case, of system copy and refresh, where we have new systems involved, there will be also a rename. So for example, if we do a snapshot and a one-on-one copy of the source system, we will have, of course, the old file structure and everything. So this all needs to be renamed and changed and make sure that the access, works properly. That's all done seamlessly by LaMa. Mm-hmm. So once the show is on the road, so to say, it's pretty much just wait. There are some functionalities where you may have to manually conform something. For example, you can decide at the end of the system if you want to unfence the target system, unfence again to make it accessible to the customer user community. This depends, what kind of quality assurance you have. If you want to have your basis people to go over and make sure that everything is validated, then you can push the button and say, okay, unfence it, make it available, or you can do this manually later. So there are plenty of ways, to deal with this. Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, copy, new system, refresh, export of the configuration, later on import after the database is refreshed. Here's some useful links. I have them. I will give them to you, Holger, and then you can probably put it, on the YouTube video.
Perfect.
I'm sure we'll find a way where we can distribute it. So now let me go, for example, into my SAP system, here my LaMa system, and I'm also having a BI system up and running. And in this one, what I would like to show you is this infamous post-copy automation. Post-copy automation may actually look familiar to you because it's based on so-called task list. So we go to SCC01, and task lists which are maintained and predefined by SAP. So you can see, for example, there's one specifically for BDLS. Then there's copy, refresh, export for exporting certain tasks. And then there is, for example, for my BW system, there would be a special workflow where it says copy, refresh, config. Yeah. So this takes care of all the tasks which I need to perform. So when we look at this as an example, of course, like with any, or as you know from SE38 ABAP programs, you can create variants. Variants is basically the parameter set which you want to execute the task list. So we can either create a new variant here. You can see it's a brand new system. It's compiling. Yeah, and then you give it a name. I can name this test, for example, with all my creativity involved here. And this brings up, creates a variant. It basically shows me all the steps. And if you look at this now, you can actually see we are talking about a list of almost 200 steps, single steps. In this case, I think it's 197. Wow. So there's some basic decisions you need to make to actually want to execute the step, yes or no.
Yeah.
Then everything here, where you see the screen and the pen or pencil, you can actually change. So, for example, you can decide which kind of batch job. Do you want to set them back, to suspended or released, this kind of, or do you want to cancel active job? How do you want to treat this, when something is running currently on the system? Just, to achieve the level of outcome you want, or to make sure you have a consistent system where nothing else is running. Or, for example, customer-defined configuration tables and everything, which has nothing there, that's just default. Yeah, but here, for example, export users. That's another good one because you can actually export the users of another client, for whatever reason. And you can also narrow down, of course, which kind of users you want to export. So this is how this works.
And I would do this probably once, right? I would probably go once through the list.
Yes, that's very important. That's a very good point, Holger, because the great thing about this is, once this is basically acknowledged and quality proven, this is what gives you the utmost agility. Because basically by the push of a button, after 2, 4, 5, 6 hours, depending how long the entire process runs, you have a new system.
Yeah,
and that's really one of the really most beautiful things, which, I mean, let's face it, the turnaround, I've heard everything between 6 and 14 days for a system copy turnaround, depending on the size and the customer, and about up to 80% is actually spent on exactly this task list.
Yeah.
What's happening there? There are some customers, they do this manually by using RP-trans exports, exporting the tables. Some use native SQL statements, to get it. I mean, again, what's the English saying? There are many ways to skin a cat. So of course, it really depends. But then you save this, and of course, in this case, think about, we need to know, since the export piece takes place on the system we have written, we need to transport it, because otherwise we're going to save the wrong data. Yeah? So once I have saved this, I have here the option to say task list variant transport. Then I get a pop-up for the transport, which we're not going to do, just to show you the link.
Yeah.
And we are basically good to go here.
And this is basically called PCA from LaMa, and LaMa is doing also many other steps in the end-to-end automation.
Absolutely, yes. After you are done with this one, all you really are going to look at and see is basically LaMa. And I'll show you a typical roadmap where this, for example, can be used. So now I'm going to my LaMa and give you a little view here as well. As mentioned, and thought, well, it's just a matter of fact, we have UI5 and we have WebDyn Pro. You can see the difference here. This is basically the setup part. Of course, in order to use LaMa, I need to make my network known. So in my case, if I look at the infrastructure, you can see this is actually quite complex. network which I have. I really have a hub-spoke network. So I have a hub and I have 4 spokes. I have a dev spoke, a QA spoke, a DR spoke, and a PRD spoke. And each of those spokes is actually an own subscription. Because some customers, they insist, or again, it's a highly philosophical issue. The benefit of having more subscription is you have more API calls. So there might be scenarios where you exhaust through stuff like LaMa, so the number of API calls. But other than this, I would say probably 95% of all the cases, it would be perfectly fine with one subscription. And if it's for cost accounting, for example, you can use tagging, stuff like this, which we also support to make sure that you can do your internal, cost distribution, cost sharing. And each of those, by the way, networks has 3 subnets. So I have a front end, a back end, and a local subnet, for example, for scale out, for ANF, this kind of stuff. Once this is set up, I come to the individual machines. And as I've mentioned, here are the systems make known to LaMa. So if I look, in this case, this is a Windows machine. There is some generic stuff. What kind of system? I can assign it to a so-called pool. The pool is basically an administrative unity. I can LaMa, of course, has its own rights management where you can say only certain people can access, machines out of this pool. Stuff like this, similar as you know it from SAP, of course, as well. That's, of course, for certain customers, absolutely a must. And here you have the connectivity. This is the communication to the host agent. You can communicate to the host agent via user password, or you can also use, of course, certificates. It's, again, from a functional standpoint, doesn't matter. It's the maintenance aspect, of course, which might pose a challenge. But then you can see here, I have my host agent version and those SAP adaptive extensions. You can perform a test here. You can retrieve the current versions after you have patched it, and you're good to go. Then some more host properties. Also interesting what you can do. You can provide the amount of subs the system provides. So you can actually have, define for this entire system to be copied. I need 10,000 subs, for example. Okay. Subs is SAP's internal, performance criteria, which is also result when you do benchmarks. And then you can make sure that LaMa only lets you do the copy or whatever you want if you provide provision enough subs from the hardware, from the VMs, basically. Yeah. Of course, this is going to the nth degree, but at least it's there, and of course LaMa itself has probably almost 20-year history. So down the road, of course, there have been a lot of challenges or questions which might be not necessarily to that relevance today as they have been at this point. So once we have installed the individual hosts, that's when we can build systems. And systems, of course, is a combination of various hosts, depending what you have to do, what you're doing here. I have used only NetWeaver system. It's quite easy because it's the size of the database, and since for me, the function outweighs everything, does it work? If I have a small database, I'm sure it can copy a bigger database as well, just takes longer. Yeah? And since we have internal accounting as well, and I have to watch my costs, small machines. So you won't find any M series on my, or even large instances, of course, on my turf here. So one of the projects I'm actually currently working on, it's a very interesting one. That's I've done my first scale-out system, and this scale-out system is actually done. Scale-out is predominantly done for BI systems to begin with, and it allows basically for having huge database, because there are BI systems, they're 40, 50 terabyte, and of course there is no machine on the planet right now, at least virtual, which can address this. So then you may have a multi-node scale-out system. So if we open this one up, you can actually see there is my database. The database has the 3 nodes. And those are all, by the way, under LaMa administration, which means I can actually exchange the nodes during runtime. I can do patching stuff like this. I can relocate it. For relocate, it has to go down. Actually, I could enable my standby because I have a standby here as well, which is managed by LaMa. So this should bring me, to really near zero downtime. And yes, there are still customers that actually use Windows. That's why I have Windows application server piece. You wouldn't think so, but they are still around. Not everybody jumps necessarily on HANA. And here you can see this is actually my cluster. It's a 2019 cluster. This was also very interesting because the 2019 cluster doesn't provide a virtual IP address anymore. It uses the physical IP addresses of the nodes and double assigns basically on the DNS level the host name. It was also quite interesting to set this up. And of course, since this I have not ERS2, I still have old-fashioned ERS because I was one level below. It's actually an official a benchmark system from SAP, which I've used. And now I'm able to actually do a system refresh of this system. I won't do this because it's going to take 4 hours or 5 hours, but I will show you the roadmap so you can see the workflow of this.
But Steffen, just to highlight
Please.
this again. So, for example, in this environment, you have a BW system running on HANA, so which basically means Linux based.
Yes.
And then you have the application server and the central services running on Windows 2019. Yes. And even in this heterogeneous setup, you can use LaMa to make system refreshes and stuff like that.
Yes. Yes. What I can't do system copies because unfortunately LaMa doesn't handle Windows cluster at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. I could, it's SAP ultimately. So in SAP, everything is changeable, everything is customizable.
Yeah.
And as we have, ABAP workbench in our ABAP-based systems, we have something called the Automation Studio. And guess what I can do here? I can create my own providers. I can create custom operations. I can create custom hooks. So in each step, I can place a hook and say, before you execute a step, do this or that. Yeah. So of course, I could say, I could create a PowerShell script, do all this, but it's actually a SAP product ultimately, so I don't want to do it. This goes too much, and it also needs to be maintained. But I practically can do this, So.
Yeah, I believe you can also you have a cluster central services on Windows cluster. So I believe with LaMa, you can also start and stop, and because the functionality of starting, stopping is integrated in the background with the Windows cluster. So yeah.
It's basically, by the way, if you look here in my, where do I have it? In the management console, of course, I have to go to my VM. You can see here, it's not full screen. That's when you have too many. Everything is green and can be handled and started and stopped, except the database, of course, out of my management console here.
Yeah. And then from there, you can start and stop. And
yes, but it's also handled by, everything is green. I don't know what kind of latency I have on the system. Actually, as you have seen, it was green. So forgive me for, I don't know why this is not showing up. It may actually swing in, may take a couple of seconds, for picking up the remote nodes. But again, this is totally handled during LaMa or by LaMa. And the good thing is, of course, I have to declare those systems as non-adaptive. So all LaMa is doing with them is basically start and stopping them. And that's all I really need, because all I care about is my database.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's make sure I hit the right window here. Yeah, here. So now if I want to refresh my database, everything, by the way, doing with something existing, that's an operation, creating something new, that's provisioning. So I go to provisioning, and then I go to my SO2 system, that's my copy. There you can see there's a refresh process. There's a refresh system. This would actually copy all the application servers as well, which I can't do for the just mentioned reasons, because my Windows is not adaptive. But I can do a refresh of the database. So here you can see that's the roadmap here, basic host name, storage, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I have to give my master password. That fingers now, let's see. I think they're not matching up here. Okay. Then I need my domain user for the Windows so that he can, talk to the firewall and then start and stop the system. The name is LaMa MS for multi-subscription. We need a local here. Use or the domain account admin user. Okay. Then I go to the next. Let's see. It doesn't like my password, I suppose.
Yeah, invalid credentials. Could not check password.
Oh, I have a typo here. FML. That's when, and you can do a validate step, by the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So before you hit the wall. See, and now here, also very interesting, I can pre-assign a preferred host. So in this case, those are my virtual host names. The underlying host here, for example, is ms/db. Actually, that's my virtual machine. But it's going to use another virtual host name, which we will see later, sorry. I can also, by the way, say I want a newly provisioned host. This would allow me to go to those ARM templates and during this process actually also create new hosts. But of course, this would imply that the hosts you create are already joined in an Active Directory or in a domain and everything, so you have to do some really meticulous afterwork, because otherwise it will gonna fall flat on your belly. Yeah? That's why I have existing hosts here. Makes it reusable and easier, and ultimately, of course, faster and cheaper as well. So now we are coming to the various host names. So there you can see. Also interesting, this here is my backend, for the communication between the nodes, because SAP wants to have it this way. And there you can see that's my virtual host name now, SO2, HANA DB1, HANA DB2, HANA DB3.
Yeah.
There, the IP addresses are sufficient. And then here, those are my windows, my cluster ASCS, my dialog instance, and one of my Azure application servers, which is also part of the cluster. Now storage, remember we do a snapshot and we create new storage. By default, we just do a extension to the existing name, which of course is not very talkative, it doesn't really tell you what it boils down to. So what you could do, at least you can call it, for example, SO2. Yeah? Or you can give it basically any name, as long as it's unique.
And Steffen, prerequisite or supported storage below, is it managed disks, for example?
No. In this case, since we are talking scale out HANA, you're using ANF. And ANF right now on LaMa, it's only supported on project base. So I need to let people this know. So if somebody's interested, want to do proof of concept or so, please have them contact SAP or Microsoft.
Right.
There's a note on the SAP Marketplace.
Okay.
And I don't foresee any trouble, getting the permission to do so, but it's not public yet. It's just to say, yeah.
Okay.
There's still some fine tuning need to be done, but thanks for bringing this up, Goran.
Yeah, because but this is a subsystem refresh use case. You have also system copy, HANA or non-HANA. So how is then with the disk prerequisites or disk technology behind?
Those systems have been all manually set up. The only thing which I can automate for the reasons I mentioned, the Windows portion not being supported by LaMa other than start stop. That's how I had to do it. So that's why we can only do the refresh. I cannot do a system copy.
Okay, on the Windows based database.
But the entire scenario was therefore for this one. If this would be a vanilla managed disk space, I could do everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No problem there.
Yeah. That was the question.
I want to show you that you can do really sophisticated stuff here. Here you can define a consistency. Interesting, by the way. What's also interesting, what you can do, you can take a snapshot of a system state prior to do the actually refresh. So if you say, I wonder how the system was at noon today, you could have taken a snapshot there, and then take the snapshot as the foundation for this refresh then.
Okay.
So you can basically couple the snapshot taking from the workflow. So this way you can really determine kind of up to the minute, the consistency of your snapshot rather. Because here in this case, you don't know, if it's going to take 3 minutes to get there or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But this time, if you decouple the snapshot, you could do this by, basically do it before. Okay, so we do online. That's all fine here.
And this is great because it's not a downtime for the source system, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But snapshot, you never have downtime.
Yeah.
Even for the copy, you wouldn't have an issue here.
Right.
Here, I have to define the user password for my users involved. So I have, of course, since we are talking Windows, I have a sub-service users, which is unknown to the Linux people, and I have a SID ADM user. I actually have, used Windows Active Directory with Linux enhancement. So this is all in one Active Directory. All the Linux attributes are all managed in Active Directory, which of course also acts as my DNS. And I will do some documentation, will be available soon, how to do this, how to make your Linux machines join Active Directory. Because think about all this with local users or host files, it's going to turn into a nightmare. I have about 50 systems running there. You never get those consistent.
Yeah.
Here, it uses my standard password. Another interesting feature here is the rename portion. So here, for example, you can rename your tenant database. If you want to give this a different name, for example, you can, change the user for the tenant, this kind of stuff. Yeah. So here, that's the source database credentials. Here, in this case, my database scheme for the target is BHP, SAP BHP. I could make this BHP or, whatever else. Then I can also change the password for the schema user. Here you have the source system. You can even change, if you want to use HTTP use ident for identification, then you can change the password for the system user, everything implicit as well here as part of this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I don't need to change anything. So like I could just click on next and that's it.
Yes. I mean, you have to make sure that you have at least the right one. So remember right now, everything is preset with my master password. And here, I don't have a master password. So I have a different one, but that's the only, and that's arbitrary, of course. I could have changed it on my source system as well. Then, of course, it came over the same way. Mm-hmm. But as you know, you have to change your password. You have to have good passwords and many passwords and different passwords, which I don't have. But just as a reminder, don't do it like I do. Okay. Again, we can do prerequisite here. We have done everything right.
Perfect.
Nope, not perfect. Password again, see?
It's not matched, okay.
Bad fingers. It's...
Yeah.
Validate one more time. Maybe it's a second. Could be the first one as well, of course, where I made a mistake. Nope, now we're good.
Successfully, okay.
You like this one. This one is the isolation part. There we basically, make sure that what is supposed to be fenced off will be fenced off, and what kind of communication is allowed. Yeah, we can go with the default here as well. Then that's the interesting part. This is the reference now to our PCA.
Yeah.
So the tasks we have talked before. You can see this the one I showed you is already pre-configured. We haven't transported the test one, but I have another one, and I need to supply this. Without this, I cannot continue to execute. I need to execute PCA. During a system copy, I can get away with it, but the assumption, of course, is you want to preserve what you have in your current target database. So therefore, it forces this on you to perform it this way.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do next. And now we can ultimately decide what are we going to do with the leftover database, since we're on ANF, and ANF is not costs money. So we can decide, leave it alone. Yeah, do not delete. So at the very worst case, we just change the mount points again. We have our old system back, because there's no change then to the application servers. All we really have done is the database. So we can just go ahead and basically change the mount points, to the old names, and we're good to go again.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can do it as part of the process. Yeah, with confirmation. So at the end, says, "Are you sure everything is fine? You want to get rid of me?" Or you can just say, "I'm so good, I don't make mistakes. Blow them away." Yeah, those are the options. It's pretty nice. Yeah. So we need to. Yeah, we are cautious. We are good, but cautious. So. And now we are ready to go. And now, see what you can do here. There's something called create a provisioning blueprint. So this is basically a snapshot or recording of the workflow we have just done. We can save this. It's basically a variant to LaMa. And so then we can go to this variant and can, pre-decide, really. I mean, my mount points are always going to be the same. The targets are always going to be the same. So you omit this. So ultimately, you only have a set of parameters, which you then execute, adapt, and that's it. So, this taking me now,
nice.
5 minutes? And of course, you get a consistent result again. That's the beauty of it, But that's all about, the quality of the outcome of the quality of the outcome. And
nice.
So I'm not going to execute this now. Just wanted, to get your feeling, the feel around. And that's how pretty much all the maintenance tasks now happen under LaMa. So this is all on the UI5 part. So that's where probably 80–90% of your time. And the more rare tasks like the creation of new systems. So this happens on the WebDynPro part.
Mm-hmm. So I think, what we see is that there are a lot of options with LaMa, yes. But I guess if you have bigger landscapes, or if you obviously, like any customer, needs to do system refresh.
Yes.
Very, very frequently, I would say. Some more often, some than others. But you would then probably spend quite some time configuring these scripts, then really saving the blueprint. And then from then onwards, I really can have consistent refreshes of my SAP system. Can I schedule a blueprint or? Okay, so I could say every Monday.
Everything. Yes, I want to have a new system based on this preset. Yes, everything is schedulable. For example. So let's get out of here. I'm going to cancel. Here, if I take the system, I have an option. Managing. No, wait. I'm in provisioning. This is an operation task.
Okay.
Yeah, it's semantics. So, Cloud Operations Optimizer, see here, stop system and virtual host. So this brings down the entire system, including the virtual host. It goes in deallocated state. If you have set it, it changes the managed disk to local, to normal disk rather than to premium disks. So this is the most cost-effective way. And of course, this process can be scheduled. You can say this system has to go down 6 p.m. each night. Yeah. We don't have an interface like SAP, Microsoft has, where you get a notification on your iPhone and can you say, no, stay up, I'm still working with you. Yeah. Maybe, down the road, I'm sure it's a cool feature where SAP made incorporate this as well. But absolutely, this can all be, totally scheduled.
Very nice.
Are there any more questions you guys have? And this is, kind of high-level overview, but I think we actually went right. We went to an entire workflow screen. So
maybe one question. It's recently from SAP LaMa team. They announced something called SAP LaMa Cloud Edition as SaaS, which is labeled as a software as a service. So do you have some more information about this? What this exactly is? What does that mean?
Since you already talk about it, I suppose it's public.
I believe it's public. Yes, yeah. It was public announcement. Yeah.
Of course, the future of LaMa most likely eventually will be in the cloud. Right now we're in a transition period, and one of the lowest hanging fruits, of course, from a return on investment for the customer is, of course, the effective use of the VM. So basically adapt them to the usage you need at the time you need them. And that's what LaMa Cloud is doing. So you can put your systems under LaMa Cloud Management, and then you can define patterns for systems. So you can define patterns when the systems are up or down. And you can also scale them out and scale them in. So for example, you have month-end closing, and then my current system is simply not strong enough. I need a larger database server, or I need more application servers. So rather than having 4 application servers, I'm going to scale out up to 7. So at the time X, according to the pattern comes, you get 3 additional application servers. And when the pattern changes again, they're going to be undeployed, of course, softly. Yeah? Okay. We're not going to pick that. That's what LaMa Cloud is doing. And I think it's a fair assumption, that there's more to come. And this right now only works in the plain Linux environments. So no mixed environment right now. So you have to be on plain Linux.
Okay.
That's what LaMa Cloud is.
I mean, it looks like some UI looks fancy and nice, so to say.
Absolutely. I mean, again, if you remember, if you go with your current workload one-to-one in the cloud and you don't do cost management, you ultimately end up paying more money in the cloud than you do on premise.
Right.
So you need an effective tool to deal with the system, deal with your cost, and that's what it does, because it actually gives you also a cost forecast. So it actually queries the cost, and it shows when you only run it 5 days a month, of course it only costs 20% or so.
Right.
Of your normal cost. Or if you do this and this, you can forecast, okay, it's going to cost me this or that.
Cool.
And scaling is basically also on, let's say, application server level. So meaning your closure or Black Friday, does it mean it's also kind of you as an admin have to know that something is coming and then you pre-configure it? Okay.
Yes. So there is. We are again, going into philosophical territory, if you ask me. Of course,
challenging.
Extreme workload, my system is at 80%. I start deploying dynamically, automatically new. Yeah. For whatever reason, SAP hasn't touched this yet.
It's a challenging topic also. Yeah.
Yes, because when, what's the threshold? Are you going to deploy new machines if you have 5 minutes, about 80%, 10 minutes, an hour? Well, then it's, at an hour 1 is already gone. You still start deploying machines. I would compare this almost with a disaster recovery. It's the judgment call. You can always do this manually. You can always overrule, what's there, of course. So you go to the console, and of course, since this is web-based, you can do this, from your resort on the Fiji Islands or so. Let's tune my SAP system. No problem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. But still,
I believe you way more to come, and of course,
of course. Let's start.
Another thing, by the way, you can do all your HANA maintenance, for example, near zero downtime HANA maintenance. So similar like SQL Server is always on, you can upgrade your nodes, and then fail back. This kind of stuff, again, we could make this a permanent live stream almost. We're still not at the end.
So Steffen, I think, it's very clear there will be new things, and I think you're definitely the expert there. So it sounded like the way how you led us through the whole journey, what you can do with LaMa, and I'm sure you only touched the surface. But
and it's a really, really great product. It's not easy, but it's probably in the current form only suitable for a certain kind of customer. But nevertheless, you get a big bang for the buck.
Yeah.
I know that it's costly, but everything you can talk about, there are plenty of ways to skin the infamous cat. So.
But just to highlight, I mean, you are also
Yes.
working at Microsoft, and this is an SAP product.
Yes.
So
Yes.
customers should not talk to you about pricing.
Yes, thanks for bringing this up. I'm a Microsoft guy, but I think it actually increased its popularity, because to quote James Bond song, nobody does it better when it comes to LaMa and integration with the cloud. We are the best.
Yeah.
Period.
And I think what really showed in a beautiful way.
For example, we support SQL Server, plain Windows installation, so you can do legacy, all this kind of stuff which other clouds can't do.
And I think we can really see that, I mean, you are working extremely closely with SAP together. And I think the results is exactly what we see here, that LaMa works extremely well together with Azure, that there are a lot of functionalities that work together in this Azure environment, what you can do with this. So I think that really shows. And I mean, personally, I think it would definitely be worth it if we have you back on the show at some later point in time when there are some new features. Maybe we drill down in certain areas and take a closer look at that.
I will definitely also enhance our documentation, and show you about really nice tricks, especially Active Directory integration, which cost me also quite some headache. Brain power, which I'm sorely missing now. No, but there's a lot of stuff you can do, and it makes us really a well-rounded system.
Right. I mean, when you once migrate the stuff, which is a lot of work, but it's done, and then comes the operational, which is never-ending story, right?
It has a really high yield, no doubt. And I only know the French one, and I don't want to brag with French now, but as you know, the appetite comes with eating. And if you have the chance by the push of a button to have this kind of agility, and you don't have to ask yourself, do I have the time now to wait 2 weeks for the turnaround? Do I have the money to pay, my provider, if you don't run the system yourself, for another system refresh? The level of agility, I think this is one of the biggest, and combined, with all the other stuff, rolling kernels, which all the other stuff, included, which we haven't even, because this is not really Azure specific, this is LaMa specific. Yeah.
Perfect.
So again,
great. I think that's a beautiful closing word. So with this, I think thank you, Steffen, for your
welcome. I appreciate the time you gave me.
No problem. I think it was really worth watching and listening to all the scenarios. So thank you very much for this. I'm sure we'll have you back. I'm sure, as you said from the very beginning.
I'm always reachable, of course, through the official channels. I'm always happy to help.
Fantastic.
As you know, at Microsoft, we are customer obsessed.
Great.
Perfect. Good. With this, thank you very much. And
thank you.
We'll see each other again, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.